Okay, being that it is 12:03, we will call this meeting to order. Good afternoon and welcome to the September 24th Oregon Tourism Commission briefing. To everyone that has joined us here today in Madras, thank you for taking the time to be with us. Today's meeting materials, including the agenda and supplemental material, can be found on the Travel Oregon Industry website if you'd like to follow along. The Oregon Tourism Commission strives to hold meetings in all regions of the state, including more rural areas. Sometimes this will include certain barriers to Wi-Fi signals that are strong enough to live stream our meetings. The recording of this meeting will be available on the Travel Oregon YouTube channel on Thursday, September 26th. Commissioners, I would like to acknowledge that in holding a meeting today, we met all public meeting notice requirements provided by state law. This included the notice of an executive session, which will be held later today. Per statute ORS 192.6602D, the meeting will be held for the purpose of reviewing and evaluating the employment-related performance of the Chief Executive Officer of any public body, a public officer, employee, or staff member who does not request an open hearing. With that, I would like to begin today by asking each commissioner to introduce themselves, and we will begin with Commissioner Pendleton.
Good morning. My name is David Pendleton, owner of America's Hub Tours, and I just want to say I'm so pleased to be here today. We had an opportunity to get out and do a walk this morning, and on the trails, we actually ran into one of the landowners who was very nice, and also during our walk, we ran into Marco Mack, one of the city code enforcement officers out ensuring the safety on the trails. And it was so nice to see that there's such a development on the trail system and that there's work being done to ensure that the safety for people that are out and about on the trails, just being safe. So pleased to be here today.
Travis?
Good afternoon. My name is Travis Hill. I am the COO of Umpqua Indian Development Corporation, which is the Section 17 for the Cow Creek Tribe, which our main entity is Seven Feathers Casino Resort. We have multiple different entities under that, Tacoma Roasting Company, K-Bar Ranches. So happy to be here today. Ditto or echo what David said. Morning walk was fantastic. I was kind of a dog whisperer this morning. We came across a couple German shepherds that were we weren't sure how they were going to act, but it turned out to be a great time, and loved watching the sunset come up this morning, kind of over the mountains and plateau. So fantastic to be here, and looking forward to the agenda for today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is David Grummels, and founder of Rogue Creamery, a commissioner at large, and I am just so grateful to be here. Madras is a place that is a connection for me for upland trials. That's upland dog trials, and I really love this area for the outdoors, and I look forward to coming back for some upland sporting with my German pointers.
Thank you, Commissioner Grummels. Commissioner Patel.
Hello, Harish Patel. I own lodging properties in Pendleton and Coos Bay. And I followed the commissioners half an hour later to make sure the trails were as beautiful as they say, and they kept it clean. I've driven through Madras many times, but this is the first time I stayed, and I'm so happy I did, and I will be back again. Thank you.
I'm Jennifer Rowe. I own Crater Lake Zipline and Rowe Outfitters, and it's my second meeting as a commissioner, and I enjoyed the walk today, but I especially have enjoyed just getting to know all of you a little bit better, and it's an amazing tribe to be a part of and have them encourage you and bring you along and answer my many, many questions. So thanks for having me again.
Thank you, Jen.
Good morning, everyone, or I'll stick with it. I'll own it. Good morning, everyone. Scott Youngblood with Solterra Development and Cascada Thermal Springs and Hotel, opening this year in Portland. And by virtue of the fact that we get to enjoy being in Central Oregon, we also have Cascada Bend that we are going to be breaking ground on here in the not too distant future in the middle of Bend. So very excited to be busy, very excited to be here. My in-laws are here in Madras, and so I get the joy of spending time with them, and of course, no excuse for not spending time with them while here in Madras this week. So it's great to be here, and thank you all for the hospitality.
Thank you. Vice Chair Willits.
More accurately, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Greg Willits, manage and own Five Pine Lodge and Shibui Spa. My mom is the masseuse there and pretty amazing. And it's a family organization that we built by hand, and now I manage. And I've thoroughly enjoyed this morning, and I enjoyed seeing a new rock climbing route in the middle of nowhere that I will be back to climb, a bolted route, pretty special. And it is on Mountain Project. I'll point it out to anybody who's a rock climber. And Madras is a great spot for me. We have dirt track racing on the top of the plateau here, which is true Americana. I think they still have $4 beers and $2 hot dogs. It is the gateway to rafting in Maupin and all over the Deschutes, fly fishing, and it's an exceptional gateway to recreation for me and my family. And thank you for having us in this great town.
Todd.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Todd Davidson. I'm the CEO at Travel Oregon. It is so good to be here in Madras and in Central Oregon, so thanks for having us.
And my name is Lucinda DeNovo, Director of Sales at the Mill Casino Hotel and RV Park, owned by the Coquille Indian Tribe. I, too, am thrilled to be here today. I think Commissioner Pendleton and I did a really good thing accidentally a couple years ago when we decided to go on a walk on our first briefing day, and it really has become a tradition. And I think what I appreciate about it most is just it allows you to get out and experience the place. And so I thank that landowner who allowed for an easement so we could walk that trail this morning. I also wanted to thank her for her warning that there were snakes on the trail, and we were heading back, thank goodness. But honestly, this place is beautiful. I have not spent much time here since I was, about 40 years ago. I've spent some time in this place at Canita, so I couldn't be more thrilled that we are on the ancestral homelands of the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Spring, that we will get the opportunity to experience Canita's resort, and I look forward to a really great meeting today. So with that, I would like to remind everyone that today's briefing provides us with some extended time to hear from and engage with staff regarding topics that have been a focus area for Travel Oregon and Oregon's tourism industry. And I will now turn this over to Todd to introduce the topic and the speakers for us.
Thank you, Lucinda. I just want to emphasize the point that you just made, that the idea of holding a briefing was born out of commission input. We were meeting as a commissioner. We had a kind of an off-site retreat orientation about how these meetings could be even more informative, more engaging, more interactive, and two ideas came from those. Two very specific, actionable ideas came from that. One was to hold a briefing so that we would have time that we could do some deeper dives on some core projects. And the second was to make sure that when we were doing presentations during our regular public meeting, that if that presentation was scheduled for, let's say, 20 minutes, that the full presentation didn't run 20 minutes. That was their allotted time. They might take 10 or 15 minutes, but always be sure to allow that time for questions and interaction. And that was put in place actually probably almost 6 years ago now, 6 or 7 years ago now, and it's basically become a tradition. And I know I certainly look forward to this time where we can just kind of come into this briefing setting. It's a little more informal. It is still a public meeting. Commissioners can certainly still take action should they choose to, but we don't often ask for the action here. We usually ask for the action during the public meeting, which is tomorrow. But you are able to do that because it is publicly noticed as a meeting. So With that, we have 4 updates and discussion topics that we'd like to bring forward today. One is going to be an update on our target audience, how we're looking at that from our marketing and our campaign perspective. Relatedly, the next one would be an update on the marketing campaign work. Then we have an update from the RCTP team, specifically from Harry, talking about the continuation of that selection process as part of the RFP that we put out earlier last spring. And then we'll conclude with an update from Brian, coming from our Insights and Impact team, the strategy, research, and analytics functional team within that department, to talk about an update on our strategic vision KPIs and where we are at this point. So with that, I'd like to invite Michael Sturdivant to come on up and provide us with the update on our target audience. And the crowd goes wild.
I feel like they're cheering for Ella and not me. Could be. My daughter. Sorry, just getting the controls. So hello, commissioners. As mentioned, I'm Michael Sturdivant, and I'm the brand stewardship strategist. My job is to help oversee the development and execution of Travel Oregon's comprehensive and brand strategies to ensure that we're align our marketing work with Travel Oregon's 10-year strategic vision, as well as our brand stewardship priorities. So as part of that work, I'm responsible for helping to develop our target audience definition to ensure that it helps support our work. So first off, as a reminder, I want to quickly go over why we go through the trouble of identifying a target audience. First off, it it helps us to provide improved relevance and engagement to our marketing efforts by understanding who our target audience is. We can tailor our messaging and content to resonate more deeply with that group and to boost their engagement with the Travel Oregon brand. This allows us to focus Travel Oregon's resources on the most promising prospects who are most likely to yield returns. Number 2, it focuses our advertising strategy on a strategic media selection. So understanding who our target audience is helps us to choose the right channels and platforms for advertising. Different audiences are more or less likely to connect with different media channels, depending on their age, interest, race, ethnicity, etc. Number 3, a well-defined target audience can provide us with a competitive edge. We know that brands that speak directly to the needs and desires of specific groups can better differentiate themselves in a crowded and noisy marketplace. And number 4, it helps us to better support Travel Oregon's 10-year strategic vision. So by identifying the correct target audience, we're establishing the foundation of a marketing strategy that can better support Travel Oregon's primary objectives, ensuring that Oregon's economy is flourishing. It's striving to be a place of equity. It delivers remarkable experiences, and it respects Oregon's natural environments. So the last time we got together, and I didn't double check the date, but I think it was about a year ago, I took you through the active adventurer targets. And at that point, I mentioned that we were going to be changing our target audience definition. Partially that's because Wyden & Kennedy, our ad agency, was going to be changing their consumer market research vendor from YouGov to MRI Simmons. And the other reason, is that it provides us with the opportunity to optimize the target audience. A little bit about MRI Simmons. It's a leading provider of consumer insights and audience research that Wyden & Kennedy subscribes to. And they use it to analyze consumer behaviors and tie those to media consumption habits to determine the best media channels to deliver our ads to. I do want to point out that the intent for the immersive guest target audience is the same as it was for the active adventurer, and that's to be able to identify high-yield travel prospects who have the attributes that make them more likely to come to travel to Oregon. I also want to point out kind of the obvious that we decided to change the name of our target audience as we noticed that the active adventure moniker was causing some confusion for the tourism industry. And the takeaway from that name was that we were only focused on reaching visitors who were mainly into extreme sports and camping. And so while we're interested in welcoming those types of travelers, in this presentation, you'll see that the target audience we're talking to is higher yield and more balanced and into more holistic Oregon experiences. So hence the new name, the Immersive Guests. So today I'm going to try and take you through the process we went through with Wyden and Kennedy's help to build the Immersive Guest target audience definition. And so what you see on this slide is kind of a more linear version of what actually happens, but hopefully it kind of illustrates in a clear manner the general process that we do go through to build the target audience. So we start off with our Oregon Visitor Profile Study to identify consumer insights that support Travel Oregon's 10-year strategic vision. And this research was fielded in 2022 and features data from over 17,000 Oregon visitors and provides insights on their perceptions, motivations, trip details, trip satisfaction, trip planning, as well as their demographics. And based on the analysis of this data, we identify key traits of folks who visit Oregon, and then we connect those key traits that are identified in our visitor profile study with those traits that Wyden and Kennedy's research from MRI Simmons measures. So I do want to call out that while MRI Simmons does measure some travel behaviors, it is a more of a general consumer study versus our Oregon Visitor Profile Study. And while it's also survey-based, it's a different methodology with different questions and a different survey panel. So to match up these traits can be a little bit of art meets science. Also, keep in mind that this target audience has to cover the entire state. So then we want to see if our target audience definition indeed delivers a higher concentration of Oregon visitors. And luckily, MRI Simmons specifically measures travel to Oregon and Washington as combined, whereas YouGov didn't. So we weren't able to kind of do that double check on the previous study. As mentioned, we're looking through the lenses of economy, equity, experiences, and environment to make sure that the target audience supports our 10-year strategic vision. So for these next pages, I'll be taking you through a lot of data points that show you how we've designed our target audience to support our Travel Oregon strategic objectives and key components that we're able to identify in the Oregon Visitor Profile, and those will be represented on the left-hand column with similar traits that are measured within MRI Simmons, and those will be revealed in the right-hand Immersive Guest column, which in this slide are not yet revealed. And so just as a quick reminder, as I mentioned a few slides ago, the Oregon Visitor Profile Study and MRI Simmons are two totally different studies, and therefore we don't expect to see exact matches, like in the numbers, for the composition of attributes from the left-hand column to the right-hand column. So one key segment of a target audience is to identify the age range. And we've opened up the age range of the Immersive Guest to 25 to 64, which comprises 70% of Oregon visitors. Previously, for the active adventurer target, we were at 25 to 54. So we've opened it up a little bit from there. And while we don't include household income as a component of the target definition, supporting the Oregon economy is an important strategic objective, and our Immersive Guest has a significantly higher household income than the general traveler to Oregon. So 152,000 household income versus 119,000, which is over 25% more. Equity is also a key objective that our target audience supports. In some cases, the immersive guest target over-indexes for some of the race and ethnicity segments. As you can see on the bottom row, for example, Hispanic travelers comprise only 5% of Oregon's total visitation. However, if we look at the census data, 17% of Oregon's population is made up of folks who identify as Hispanic or Latino. So we definitely have room to grow this very engaged travel segment. And you'll see later that we have a BIPOC or Black, Indigenous, and people of color version of the immersive guest target, which gives us another way to increase our reach amongst these key communities. So before we continue going through how we match up key attributes to the MRI-Simmons measured elements, we need to make sure that we support the on-the-ground experiences, which is another strategic lens, as mentioned, that provide a foundation for the types of activities that visitors to Oregon are likely to participate in. So we used Travel Oregon's visitor profile study to identify what we call 3 pillars or types of travel activities or experiences that our research has identified as Oregon's strengths. So this chart that you're seeing here is comprised of attributes that are identified through 2 questions. So one is, how important were each of the following to your decision to take this trip to or within Oregon? And that's represented on the vertical y-axis. And then how satisfied were you with each of the following about your trip experience within Oregon? So that's plotted on the horizontal x-axis. So if you look up in the upper right-hand quadrant, you'll see 3 circles in red. And so that quadrant represents strengths of Oregon's travel product or travel attributes. And local food, outdoor recreation, arts, historic, and cultural heritage experiences are those 3 attributes that we would call or that we consider our key pillars. And so we want to choose MRI-Simmons measured niches that fall within these key pillars as we continue to build our target audience definition. Excuse me. So getting back into matching up key attributes to the MRI-Simmons measured elements, I want to call out that sustainable practices is an attribute that is identified by visitors as an Oregon strength. And it's also related to our key environment objective. So we built it into our immersive guest definition because we want to invite visitors who, like we do, respect Oregon's natural environments. So no, we also understand that sustainably minded folks don't always travel with their values intact, but we do want to invite folks that are sustainably minded. And on the next page, you'll see the specific niche activities or experiences that make up key pillars and encourage visitors to Oregon's world-class experiences. So you'll be glad to know that I'm not going to walk you through each of these identified travel activities. But as mentioned, we did want to make sure that the MRI-Simmons activities we chose mapped back to the experiences that Oregon is known for and our strengths, and that's what you're seeing here. I do want to call out, again, that we're not always going to find a one-to-one exact match between what we find in our visitor profile study and what we find in the data from MRI-Simmons. One place I'd like to call out is within the local food pillar. So that's that last row on the page. We chose to represent this category through wine and beer consumption, which are, as you know, 2 important culinary products of Oregon, as opposed to using what MRI measures, which is fine dining. Oregon is more known for farm-to-table and fresh local than we are for white tablecloth eating experiences, which fine dining represents. Sorry. So I do call out fine dining later in the presentation because the immersive guest target is willing to have fine dining culinary experiences as well. So it's not like we're not taking that into account. So to follow up on all the components we just went through, here's a snapshot of the immersive guest and BIPOC immersive guest audience definitions on one page. Thank you. Also, you see here that the immersive guest makes up around 11% of the total U.S. adult population, with the BIPOC immersive guest comprising 30% of the total immersive guest population. So you'll note that I don't go through the target geography within this presentation, as Wade and Katie are going to cover that in their presentation. So finally, I'm getting to the part where I tie back to whether or not the immersive guest is likely to travel to Oregon. So in this case, as I mentioned, travel to Oregon and Washington, as that's what MRI Simmons measures. And the answer is yes. Folks who we define as the immersive guest index at a 220 for travel to Oregon. So in other words, immersive guests are 120% more likely than the general U.S. adult population to travel to Oregon. So also, you can see here that immersive guests are high-yield travelers. They spend over twice as much as the general U.S. population on domestic traveler. They're 14% more likely to pay for a high-quality hotel, and they're over 2.5 times more likely to pay for fine dining while they travel, as I mentioned before. So Wyden and Kennedy pulls MRI Simmons data that identifies the media channels that are most likely to deliver consumers who fall within our immersive guest target audience definition. They, along with Sparkloft, our social media agency, and Logical Positions, our keyword search agency, then put together a media plan that provides recommendations for specific media partners that will most efficiently and effectively deliver the Travel Oregon brand campaigns ads to our target. So here you see the current roster of ad partners and channels that we're using for the current Travel Oregon with Travel Oregon campaign. And you'll notice that we're looking at channels that all index above 100 for delivery of our immersive guest target. And the indexes indicate concentration levels where 100 is average. So for example, if you look at the third bubble from the left, Instagram, that 48% of our target audience uses Instagram with this social media platform indexing at a 124 for immersive guests, which means that Instagram is 24% more likely to deliver our target audience than it is to deliver the general population. So I appreciate your time this morning, that you paid attention to all the numbers. I also appreciate that Matt scheduled me early in the agenda because of all the numbers, I'm sure. But I did want to point out I'll be producing a related and updated target audience white paper, which will cover kind of all of this information about the immersive guests. And I'll be able to share that with you in early October. So beyond that, let me know if you have any questions. Hopefully we have a few minutes. Okay, good.
Thanks. Thank you, Michael. First of all, I just got to pick up on your playful line about getting to go first. Commissioners, you may or may not know that around the office, it's almost like Survivor, the commission meeting agenda edition, in terms of who gets to go first and who gets to go last, because we are very engaged as a commission, and sometimes we run long, and so we may be nudging that person who's last on the agenda to find some creative way to maybe abbreviate their presentation. So with that, Michael, I just want to personally thank you for, number one, presenting such a clear rationale for the evolution that we have made from the active adventure to the immersive guest. and the tiebacks that you made very intentionally and very thoroughly back to the vision and what it is that we're working to accomplish. So with that, I would gladly open it up for any comments or questions that commissioners may have. Harish, please.
Yes, I noticed there's a big gap between male and female travelers. Is that a shift, or was it always like that, and is it just our region?
I believe, I'd have to go back and look at the data. I think we skew a little bit female anyway, and the immersive guest skews female as well. I'm not sure exactly what the direct relationship is. I'll have to go back and look at that. I think the active adventurer was a little bit more 50-50, but it didn't exactly represent what we were seeing in the visitor profile data. And I do know that, and the other piece is, I would prefer to skew female because we do know that women are more likely to make the travel decisions in the family. So I don't have like the exact data point on that, but I do. That's some of the things that we've noticed in terms of like the different data that we've looked at over the years.
Thank you.
Michael, I want to thank you. I want to thank you personally. The fact that you went through this whole contrived effort to rename the target audience, to involve Wyden and Kennedy, to make up all of these statistics, all for the purpose of broadening the demographic profile for those of us who are now preparing to exceed our 54th year, so that it's now 25 to 64. It was very kind of you, and I wanted to say thank you.
Well, sample size of one, I had to like extend it a little bit. It's all about me. But I appreciate that you noticed that.
You've got at least one commissioner that's on to you already, Michael. That's what's going on here. Travis.
Quick question. Did you have any aha moments going through this process? I noticed there was a couple variations between what MRI had and what the previous data from 2020 was, and there's some variations, like the Hispanic population was at 17%, which is a pretty large compared to what the percentage was in 2020. Same thing with the income range. Was there like any things that, as you're going through this exercising process, that was like, wow, we were kind of off basis on that?
No, I think that for the active adventurer, we kind of went through kind of a similar process. I don't know that I explained it quite as clearly before.
Okay.
I think that, and we've always kind of known, I think probably one of the big aha moments was to be able to go back now with the MRI Simmons database and look at, are we delivering that traveler to Oregon? Because we always kind of knew it intuitively that if we were building it, this immersive guest, or previously the active adventure guest, using the visitor profile study as kind of our building blocks, that we would indeed be getting Oregon visitors. But this is the first time that we were able to tie it back directly and see that index against actual visitation to the, I guess in this case, the Northwest, Oregon and Washington. Whereas we weren't able to see that before. So that was satisfying to see that. And to see that Oregon, we were neck and neck with New York in terms of having the immersive guest as, as a great target audience. Beyond that, the rest of the states kind of fell in behind.
Sure.
So it was definitely, being able to kind of see that and tie it back around was great.
Yep. Thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Hey, Michael.
David.
How are you doing?
Good.
Good. Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering, the work you did with Wyden Kennedy, am I to assume that the targeted audience, it really doesn't matter whether it's a short, long haul in the U.S. here or international visitors? And the second part to that is simply with the immersive guests, I'm assuming historically they do return. Is any way to figure that out? Because you take like the Germany or India. Normally, we get visitors from those two parts of the world. They tend to move towards the Mercy type.
That's a good question, and I probably should have clarified that to begin with. This is a domestic traveler.
Okay.
Using domestic research data. So, really good point, and I'll add that to the white paper. So, thank you for calling that out. And we, in terms of kind of the international traveler, we look at other data for that. So,
thanks.
Thank you.
And as far as your question, David, regarding the, and I know you were speaking to kind of long haul in terms of international, but in terms of what might be a further afield domestic market versus what might be considered more of our easy drive market within 300 miles, more to come on that in the next presentation. So.
Michael, I just wanted to say thank you for your work on the white paper. I look forward to seeing that. And I wanted to thank you, and I was remiss, I should be thanking all of those who are presenting, because there's a lot of information in this meeting, and we got all the information 2 weeks in advance. So I commend all of you for that. It made it a lot easier for commissioners to digest that information. So thank you.
Oh, awesome. I'm glad that worked.
All right. Thank you, Michael.
That's it?
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
And Lucinda, thank you for acknowledging that. After I made my comments about how commission engagement had led to the evolution of our meetings, adding the briefings and such, I realized that there was that third component, and that was your request specifically, that we get the PowerPoints to the commissioners in advance, even if they're still a little bit in development, a little raw, not quite finished, but that opportunity to be able to review and maybe pose questions in advance of the meeting. Of course, it's not only at the meetings that commissioners can bring questions about the work and the plans and the vision, et cetera. It's at any time, really. But certainly when you see those PowerPoints, being able to bring the questions forward at that time, even in advance of a meeting. So always works well. So with that, we're going to talk more deeply with an update on our marketing campaign. And I'm going to turn it over to Katie, and I'll ask you to obviously introduce Wade as you do so, because I know he's a new face to the commission. So Katie, I'll turn it over to you.
Hello, Commissioners. I'm Katie Clare. I'm Director of our Brand Services team at Travel Oregon, and I'm very pleased to introduce you to Wade McCarthy, our current and full-time Travel Oregon employee as our paid media manager. So we recently brought Wade on to our staff on no longer a temporary status, and we are just so excited, and I hope that you fully understand that and appreciate that even more at the end of this presentation when you see what he's able to share about our audience. So Michael inspired me, and I think our presentation today is to further push the art meets science portion of our advertising campaigns. And we'll talk a little bit about the current Travel Oregon with Travel Oregon campaign up front, and you'll see some of the beautiful creative that we have that's launching in market right now, which is truly the actualization of a lot of the information and data that Michael just shared. And then we'll talk about how we are making sure that the right people see that at the right times, and Wade will go through that in a lot of detail. So Michael didn't go over, so I certainly cannot, so let's get moving. All right, so last year, we broke new ground as we launched our brand new evergreen brand platform, Travel Oregon with Travel Oregon. Go through the beautiful photos of everything. What we were really excited about that is that we had this evergreen platform that allowed us to deliver on our 10-year strategic vision. And I've shared this slide before, but it's really important to ground that this platform and brand campaign allows us to have different levers to hit the 4 E's at different portions of the campaign or with different creative, and have a wide variety of tools. But really it ensures kind of these key objectives, that Oregon is a travel destination that's welcoming to all. It creates a consistent and relevant way of reaching new audiences throughout the year. It drives stronger and more personal connections to the state and its residents. and it points people to areas with the most economic need and avoids overuse in others. So again, you'll kind of keep hearing us talk about those 4 E's and how we're really trying to get there, which is, of course, the economy, equity, environment, and experiences. So how did it go? It went great. It was perfect. It was wonderful. No, what we're seeing here are some of our key top-line results. So we're able to drive with over 175 pieces of creative. Like today, you're going to see me share 3 pieces of creative with you. The team that I'm working with on the brand stewardship team is creating many, many, many layers of creative that we're able to hit. And so this is just kind of sharing, like, we get a small window, but with all of this different creative, we're able to achieve a wide variety of goals. We had, so like I said, over 175 pieces. We drove over 1.4 billion impressions that drove to TravelOregon.com, which is really exciting. I'm going to share some big numbers and add some context here at the end. So with that, we had over 89 million video completes. So that's full views of our Widening Kennedy creative and also our regional content that we shared that we created with Sparkloft. With our online travel agencies, we had an average of $130 to 1 return on advertising spend throughout the campaign. And then something that's really important for us is that we were able to drive with attributable links and clicks to TravelOregon.com. We had over 3.6 million sessions that were delivered to TravelOregon.com. Throughout all of this, the kind of key takeaways are, you can ask Kevin, he always gets a little like, well, you pay for impressions. And so what are we really trying to share here? And that's that we were able to fine tune and deliver above goal with all media partners. And we're able to make those smart decisions with people like Wade and Michael that were working consistently to make sure that we were checking in with our paid advertising agency partners and delivering above goal, to goal, or shifting tactic. And so throughout that, with the sessions to TravelOregon.com, we were about 1 million sessions. We delivered over 1 million more sessions to TravelOregon.com with our advertising campaign this year than we did last year. And so what that looks like is just allowed us to have, I'm gonna go to the next slide so I continue to deliver context. So what that allowed us to do for the entire fiscal year was we delivered over 7.2 million sessions to TravelOregon.com. We had over 55,000 individual guide orders and over 148,000 email subscribers to our e-news list. These 3 numbers make up our marketing, our MVP KPIs. So what we look at with these KPIs are, what are we doing every year on an annual basis to deliver key results that we know drive visitation. These 3 numbers allow us to compare results year over year, regardless of campaign or creative and like what's in market. So what we're able to do, sorry, stay with me. Take the information from the last slide of what we're able to deliver with the campaign and what are we doing on an annual basis year over year. And that's delivering above goal in a really compelling way that we know delivers trips to Oregon. So we had, with this, sorry, I'm kind of off track here. We had a 6.6% increase to our total web sessions, which against our 22-23 goals. And so what was exciting about that is, if you'll remember, we delivered above goal against the year that we had the Extraordinary is Ordinary campaign to market. So we know that we were able to deliver consistent and strong results to TravelOregon.com against some of our biggest campaign work that we've done, which included the campaign that we had in market when Oregon 22, the World Track and Field Championships, was in market. We delivered additional guide orders, and we also had email subscribers, which you've heard our team talk about before, deliver additional stays and dollars on trips. So all this to say, things were good, we were excited, and what's next? So we took a step back and we're saying, what are we doing this year to help expand this campaign? I shared a little bit about this at our meeting in June, but this year we're really looking to build on the success by focusing on the individual and human perspective of the Travel Oregon with Travel Oregon platform. This allows us to connect experiences and guides with our travelers, allowing them to see Oregon in a way that they would never see by themselves. So just regrounding in the flow of the year. We're saying summer, but we just were able to launch in early September this Reignite, this connection with Portland. This fall, we're going to be shifting into our Bounty campaign, which allows us to focus on food and culinary, coming off of what you just heard Michael talk about. Hopefully you can see some of the connections here of how we take the data and connect it back towards how we have our creative coming into market. In winter, we're going to echo what we did last year, which was really deliver on conversions, which is focusing on partners like our online travel agencies. We just also describe conversions as subscriptions to our e-newsletter or ordering our guide, because we know that's planting that trip inspiration and connection with the Travel Oregon brand. And then in spring, we're looking to, you can see here Spark. This is our beautiful advertising language, but that's really allowing us to connect towards trip planning while really instilling responsible recreation that continues to be an ever-growing important part of our industry and how we want Travel Oregon's brand to be connected to encouraging travel, especially heading into the summer season. We're going to be focused, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Portland direction, and just, again, like I've kind of mentioned this before, but just want to really make sure it's regrounded, is that this effort was done in collaboration with our partners at Travel Portland, not only in the creative development, but also understanding when they had paid media and market in their flighting, so we have complementary markets and strategies with our partners. And then there's also tied for our governor's task force recommendation that helps us to drive that economic impact for the downtown core of Portland. So our strategic point of view, of course, is that Portland has the guts to go for it. Portland is fertile soil for whatever ideas people want to see in the world. Sometimes it works and it lands a TV show, and sometimes it's messy, but everyone's always willing to wake up and try again. This also comes from a point of view within that we're looking at is how are we resetting the narrative with a fresh take on what makes Portland, Portland. And so how we're looking at this is how are we encouraging and also inviting people to come to Portland. And so it's really centering on Try Something Portland. It's a strong call to action that leans into travelers' desires for new experiences, and then also allows us to really capture that creative spotlight of focusing on these really cool experiences that we know exist there. This then goes because for whatever works for Portland, if we're doing it right, works for Oregon. And so this also allows us to work throughout the year of how are we really connecting these stories and what we're sharing within our creative to this Try Something Oregon. So again, it's based off of we want you to come and experience this as well. We want you to be here, and you have to see these unbelievable cool things. So with that, I'm going to connect it over to Scott for some creative.
In Portland, Oregon, people are all about trying things. Like opening a world-famous restaurant in your house.
It's like having a dinner party 4 nights a week.
If you want to try something too, try something Portland. In Portland, Oregon, people aren't afraid to try things. Like opening a sports bar that exclusively plays women's sports.
I built it, and they came.
If you want to try something too, try something Portland.
I love it.
In Portland, Oregon, people aren't afraid to try things. Like forest therapy. In a forest just 10 minutes from downtown.
Breathe in. And breathe out.
If you want to try something too, try something Portland.
So for those, we have 3 in market right now. We have started working on production for our Bounty spots, which will be shifting to our statewide focus, which will allow us, we're going to be in the Willamette Valley and in Southern Oregon. Then we're going to, we have concurrently we have production that's going to Eastern Oregon, Mount Hood in the Columbia River Gorge. It's also, we're doubling up on social production for Portland, again, just to, we know that we need to drive that economic impact. And then in the spring, you'll see creative coming out that focuses on the coast in Central Oregon. So with it throughout the calendar year, And throughout, again, like the layers of creative that we have, we will have statewide creative and production. You're just seeing the Portland focus right now. So really going back to Field of Dreams, if you build it, if you build it, doesn't mean they'll come. So how are we going to make sure that people see this? And I'm getting ready to hand it over to Wade. So we have, for our media goals for this campaign are to drive awareness among our primary and opportunity markets. We're telling our side of the story when Portland is top of mind. So this creative debuted during the Oregon State game, which we can talk about after if people want to deep dive on that. And then really focusing on reigniting Oregon's love for Portland. So with that, how are we going to do it, Wade?
Thank you, Katie. Very similar to what Michael talked about, taking a step back, recognizing our success, but taking a step back to see how we can improve it, see how we can be a little bit different, but so much better. Last year, these are the markets that we targeted in this green coverage here. And this is pretty adequate, can be very strategic. But what happens when you put awareness ads against these and then consideration ads and then search all confined just to these targets? Well, the first thing that happens is that media platforms target geographies differently. So you might be working with a DMA, a designated marketing area on one platform, a metro area on another, a city. That green dot around San Francisco, we told our partners to go target San Francisco. Depending on the platform, you might get San Francisco, you might get the whole Bay Area, you might not get San Jose or Colma. And depending on where the data comes from to make these decisions, whether they're based on DMAs or core-based statistical areas, CBSAs, you may or may not be excluding too much. And that's the first consideration. So this year we're planning to increase our campaign reach with greater scale, efficiency, and alignment with how ad platforms actually work when the rubber hits the road. And what we want to do is make sure we're showcasing our traveloregon.com as a resource while giving true trip stories and messaging about the true experience of traveling to Oregon. So this was our starting point. We took a look at our website data. This is just a little bit of a city breakdown. What happens when you put awareness across a large swath of the country? The largest populations pull all that traffic into it. It's like throwing pebbles into the ocean, really. It just pulls it around here unless you put on controls. So what we found were LA, Chicago, they were the top. They're great markets. But we really wanted to get a little bit more deeply into how we convey this messaging. So the other thing to mention is that Chicago is a great market, but it's not a top 10 market for Oregon. So we really want to make sure that we're adequately reaching the markets that send travelers to Oregon. The other thing we want to look at, this is a couple of graphs from Arrivalist. Arrivalist measures digital exposure, in case you're not aware of it, digital exposure and whether or not that campaign gives lift to arrivals and overnight stays. One of the things they produce is an exposures, this actually should be exposures by arrival, my apologies. And what you can see on this graph, on the right-hand side, Oregon has a nice, good, healthy curve going down to about 11 exposures. This is set up from 1 to 20, and then it goes 30, 40, 50. So all the way over to the right, you can see that many people, many travelers in Oregon saw her ad like 50 times. It's not as efficient as we'd like it to be. On California's side, you can see 1, 2 drops down to 3 really fast. So there's probably some underexposure in California, probably some overexposure in Oregon. We want to take all this data and digest it and try to look for ways that we can use the data that we have on hand and get a good idea of where we should be targeting our messages. We took the Arrivalist data and we took the top 30 DMAs, designated marketing areas, Nielsen's old TV targeting. And then I worked with Michael, and we pulled some Dean Runyon data that uses core-based statistical areas. So you can see where we're already messing up on our definitions. So we have to kind of put these together to get a solid picture. And here's an example of just some of that data. I mentioned 30 that we started with. This is not all 30 of them. So what would we do with this data? Well, one thing that we want to find is how familiar are people from origin markets to traveling in Oregon? Is there a mathematical formula for that? Is there a way to say, you know, do we need to send awareness campaigns to people in Oregon who already love Oregon, already know how beautiful it is? Maybe it would be better served to send them trip ideas, itineraries, tips and tricks, maybe don't go to Multnomah Falls this weekend, go next weekend. Something a little bit more on the consideration level of the marketing funnel. But what would the math look like? So what we put together Dean Runyon's economic and number of trips from their circle, the CBSA, and we found the same population, so at least we're working with the same data, CBSA population, and we came up with trips per capita. So trips per capita this year and this ago is substituting for familiarity. The higher level trips per capita, the more familiar they are with us. And so that's a great start. That's something new. We also put some MRI Simmons data that Michael talked about before into the data to kind of find out what these propensities were at a state level. Okay, we're getting there though. We're almost to the best part. So MRI data from Michael introduced the immersive guest also comes with the probability that a certain state would both visit Oregon or Washington, but would they also be an immersive guest? So we lined up that data, trips per capita, whether or not they have a strong probability of coming to Oregon and Washington, but we're concerned mostly about Oregon. And so then we came up with this kind of setup with the data. And the great thing about this is if the data changes, this will change. But we created 3 large zones that would have their own type of gravity, which would draw into, and I'll show you that in a moment. But of the 30 origin markets that we started with, 7 washed out. They washed out, and sorry to say, again, Chicago is one of them. This is not all 30 of them, by the way. But Chicago washed out in that the economic direct spend, you can see it's not as high as Walla Walla. And mostly the trips per capita are very, very low. So again, if we're gonna advertise there at an awareness level where we're just talking about Oregon, that is kind of throwing pebbles in the ocean. So we carved it out to 3 different market areas. And those 3 market areas, again, are gonna be something that we do a little differently, but again, so much better. We've created this marketing map. Now, this marketing map does have some new areas, but in the green area, those are people most familiar. So maybe we should be talking more personally with them. We would lower the frequency on some of the commercials that you just saw in those areas, and then talk about itineraries and trips. In the blue area, we would raise the frequency, and in the peach, it was gonna be orange, but it's peach now. In the peach area, that would be high frequency. So somebody in LA, we would probably have to tell them more than once to please, consider Oregon for your next vacation. And very similar to when you have large swaths of marketing area, there are gravity wells. So even though we are adding back a little bit of Medford, we're adding in Chico and Redding, still the majority of the dollars for that green area are gonna go to Portland, they're gonna go to Seattle. They're just gonna be drawn there because of populations. In blue, it's gonna be mostly San Francisco, even though we added Reno and Phoenix and Denver. There are a lot of tests that we're running right now, but the idea is that we're going to treat these areas a little differently. So that's the awareness side, and that's a really top, we want to tell you all about Oregon. Have you thought about Oregon? What about people who are already thinking about Oregon and they're typing it into Google? That's the other end of the spectrum that we should be looking at. These are people who are interested in Oregon, they're raising their hands, they're self-selecting to get more information. Now, in some cases, you would line it up with your awareness because awareness can flow into more searches. But then we're basically just being dark and ignoring a huge swath of the country. In this case, because people are raising their hands, we can be a bit more aggressive, have a bigger net, and catch more. But we still want to be smart about it. So this is our search map at the moment. It could change. I mentioned that we took out Chicago from awareness. The purple areas have a higher bid than red and orange. So we're still being competitive around Chicago, but only for people who are raising their hand. The green is where we want to be really aggressive. And the blue in Oregon, we kind of want to carve some space. If you're in Oregon and you're searching, wouldn't it be great to see Travel Portland as maybe a top result because you're interested in Portland? Wouldn't it be great to see visit Central Oregon if that's what you're interested in? We'll still be there. We'll still be very competitive in that space. But we wanted to carve out a little bit of breathing room for our RDMOs as well. So the other thing that I would throw in here is the timing on search. In the orange line, that's our organic, that's what normally happens. This line on the bottom is set up, 1 is January, 12 is December. In the summer months, people come to Travel Oregon to see what they're going to do on the weekend or see what they're going to do 1 or 2 weeks out. And there's a large uptick during the summertime. We wanted to support shoulder season when people are going to make some more substantial plans for the year. So the green line is what we're using for paid, and the net result flattens the curve a little bit of that blue line that's on top. So with all of these intentions, based on platform, based on audience, based on how close people are together, how familiar they are with visiting Oregon, we're starting to adjust by our intent for the ad and starting to adjust by the platforms themselves. For example, there are native campaigns. Native are those ads that are in the feed. They're supposed to trick you into thinking it's content that you already thought you were going to have. But really, it's really an awareness tactic. So we have to adapt to the very first map that we saw. If we're looking at social media, that's a whole ecosystem in itself. So depending on the ad, that could be awareness, or we could flip that map completely and look at itineraries and what to do next when you get to Oregon. So again, it's a little bit different. It's going to be so much better, and we are actually seeing some great results with increases in site traffic from places like Anaheim, Sacramento, Reno, Stockton, a lot of areas there. Denver is up. We were in Phoenix, and it's up year over year again. So these tactics are playing out very well. But because they're data-driven, we can always make adjustments. Mm-hmm.
So just wrapping this up, hopefully you can see how this is all coming together, and we're bringing all these different pieces to create a really compelling campaign that we hope continues to deliver in ways that are impactful. We are calling it Portland Summer. Our Portland work is in market right now. We're going to be having, I would say, like a pretty seamless transition into fall and bounty. Then we'll head towards winter, and then we will be wrapping this up with spring, with focusing on more of a responsible recreation message. With that, that's what we have today.
All right. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Wade. Commissioners, I'm very pleased to be able to announce that you'll all be receiving 3 continuing education credits from Central Oregon Community College in Marketing Analytics, thanks to Michael's presentation and this one. Seriously, Commissioners, questions for Katie and for Wade?
I just wanted to commend you both. I know when we did the shift to the Always On campaign, it really was, and the whole team, I want to thank the whole team too. Kevin, I was talking to you there. So when we pivoted, it was intentional, right, to always be able to pivot with that Always On campaign and use those dollars more smartly. And Wade, the addition of you really just to me is an extension of that. So I think you're going to be really popular with this commission because we're always asking what I like to call pointy-headed questions, and you brought some really compelling data. So my hat's off to the team for the work that you're doing and the addition of you, Wade. I have one question for you, Katie. You talked about 1 million sessions over prior year. You also talked about, I think, the campaigns, and you referenced back to 2022 that this was one of the more successful campaigns. Did I understand that correctly?
So just so I'm really clear about that, I've been thinking about how I could have said that better since I stopped talking. So for what we're able to look at when and I'll go back to this slide so you can see it. Sorry to do it this way. Okay, so what we're able to track and what we look at and what Wade honestly does a lot of is you can see here, so we attribute through UTM codes how many sessions from our paid advertising are driving traffic to TravelOregon.com. And so what we look at then for our annual goals, when we look at these MVP statistics, the marketing results, so then we are able to see how our paid advertising sessions to TravelOregon.com contribute to the total number. So we know that for the fiscal year prior, it was 2.8 million sessions to TravelOregon.com. I have a hard time in general comparing campaign to campaign, especially because it is like apples and oranges. Like they had different goals. But that campaign was our largest campaign during any particular time. And we had, for the fiscal year for 22-23, we had 2.8 million sessions driven to TravelOregon.com from paid advertising. So this year we had 3.6. So it's about 1 million sessions more. And what that allowed us to do is then, and this could be an entirely different presentation, like for the next continuing education class, but then you look at how all the different drivers of sessions TravelOregon.com contribute. And so one of the biggest, what you're seeing here is that we have the 6.6% increase in growth year over year. Why we're able to have an increase in growth that is not 1 million sessions higher, it is higher, but it's not that much, is because other factors are consistently changing in the marketing universe. So organic search continues to be our largest driver to TravelOregon.com, but it also is one of the biggest unknowns and a variable that we're consistently trying to adjust and overcome with different levers. Having a campaign that was always on in market allowed us to adjust those tactics at different points. Michael and Wade were able to look at it pretty much in January and go, hey, how are our marketing tactics and our levers working to contribute to these goals? And we shifted, which is that presentation that was at the governor's conference where we really talked about that traffic. So this is how those advertising sessions contribute to the overall sessions to TravelOregon.com. And hopefully that's clear.
That's perfect.
Okay.
And then my question is, we spend a lot of time at my organization comparing to 2019. And so have you made that consideration, pre-COVID to see what those numbers look like?
We haven't looked at the numbers to TravelOregon.com, like these numbers in a 2019 comparative lens.
I would just be curious to see what they look like pre-COVID versus today. So I don't know if that's something that, I know the campaigns are different and I know we're comparing different things, but if there was a way that you could share that with commissioners, I think it would be interesting.
I don't want to say what I think I know, but I think you'll have a really interesting story seeing what we've been able to have as far as brand affiliation and information with TravelOregon.com and session growth. So we'll get that to you.
Great. Thank you so much.
That goes perfectly into my comment because I want to thank you for the follow-up from our last meeting. A lot of people have asked, are staff following up with questions you had in meetings? And the answer is yes, and they're accurate, and we're getting that data directly from staff and you in particular. Thank you so much. When they asked that question, I realized I should have shared that data with them as well, because we're asking questions as a commission that most of us have. So my flaw not sharing that information. In the future, maybe if you send that information, that follow-up on 2019, if you send it to all commissioners, it'd be helpful, I think, for all of us.
For sure.
Wade, thank you for presenting things in an easily digestible way. It is, you touch a spot in my brain that fills me with joy. Thank you. Numbers and rationale on why we're shifting and why we would do that. I appreciate that. Is the immersive, for both of you, is the immersive traveler segment smaller, larger than our active adventurer?
I think based on Michael's presentation, it's expanded not only in age range, but in interest.
How about total number of people?
That's a good question.
We'll get that exact to you. It is comparable, but
Is it more costly to advertise? This is more to you. It's less costly?
I wouldn't go look at one is more effective, but there'll be a good follow-up for us that we'll send over to you so we get it just right. But it is also like another apples to oranges is making sure part of what you'll see with how we look at the cost is also connected to what Wade just presented, which is the targeting and those exposures, because that's being able to have that level of targeting with these different tactics is really exciting. And you'll see that within how we're delivering. So we'll follow up.
And then Wade, you hit on something interesting, and that is the competition that Travel Oregon naturally or in the past has naturally had with the RDMOs. That's a great thing to realize, because we're all paying for these Google ads and competing for those, which drives up the price. Thanks for thinking that one through and redirecting to RDMOs that do an exceptional job for the region. I appreciate that. My final piece, sorry for the long-winded, is personally we have developed a new season, sadly, for Central Oregon, for the state of Oregon, and that's wildfire season, July 15th through September 15th. Our advertising differs. We're not, and also we have a smoke-free guarantee, but also Front Desk is directing based on the forecasting models now available to us for smoke, forecasting models for fires. We're directing our guests that do show up, a few that do show up, where they can recreate, where they can go and dine, where it isn't smoky. Sadly for Sun River, sadly for Love Pine area this year, and Bend in particular, it was sending them further north, Camp Sherman and a little bit of Madras. I would be interested to see another season, not this year, hopefully, but down the road, I think it's a whole different market and certainly affects the Central Oregon and Eastern Oregon regions.
Wade, welcome to the team. Great presentation. Katie, congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Number 3, right?
Number 3.
Okay. Hey, I want to say too, Katie, I was very pleased with the two of you, as Michael as well, in terms of keeping in front of us what the 4 E's are and applying them to the work that you do. That's very important to me. I remember the first commission meeting that I attended, I had a few questions for you, and in terms of just goals and results, and I needed that information. You did a great job of effectively communicating back to me every step of the way the work and the progress that you guys were making. And over a short period of time, I've just gained this amazing level of confidence in the work that you do. So Wade, welcome to the team. Greg's comment on the follow-up of some of the questions, I think he knows that I'm one of those that look very close to ensure that our questions are answered in a timely manner. And I know Todd works very hard on that as well. But there's one thing that I'd like to see more of, and you touched on it when we talk about Portland and the investment and what we're doing there. It's the other piece, that how it supports the rest of the state of Oregon. If there's some way that we can elevate that, the importance of it, just a little bit more, it would be, I think, helpful tremendously. But I'm glad that you actually, commented on it.
Yeah, and I'll connect with Todd and about the follow-up, because I will say the deserter in the room, Brian Mullaney, who left our team, we do have some really compelling information that I think that you'll appreciate, because we have been also asking and answering the question of why is this Portland work so important to the entire state. And so, yes, I hear that, and there'll be a follow-up that we'll get to you that very soon.
Thanks.
Katie?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. And Wade, thank you, and welcome to the team.
Thank you.
And Michael, I thank you for the information you shared as well. And it's just really exciting to see the return per dollar. It's just like, wow. So 130 to 1. I wondered in pushing our partners, as I know you do, to get the biggest return per dollar, if we have an internal goal of pushing that higher. And so just a question to think about, not for this, and not expecting an answer at this meeting, but something we can talk about. I also believe, as David commented, that Portland's success is shared by all of Oregon, and I think that there's a great opportunity to show how that success is distributed and what we might do to report the data of that. And the marketing ads were just so much fun and engaging. Really, really enjoyed that. It gave me a chuckle. And I look forward to future presentations. And thank you again for your work today. And Todd, I look forward to the travel marketing analytics certificate at our next meeting. Thank you.
Harish.
Again, a great presentation, very educational, and I too am looking forward to my credits because I'm not a marketing expert. But, and also, it's great that you're changing your tactics with times, because it's just like everything else, everything evolves. Now that return 1 to 130, how is it how do we come to that number? If you can just explain in a layman's word.
Yeah, so that is specific for our online travel agency partners. And so those are statistics that those platforms are able to share with us based off of the direct ad spend that we have. What we were, throughout this year, what we also were able to do in an optimization that we made was that typically partners like Expedia, Priceline, others that we partner with, they include flights. And so we've had them exclude that part of the data. So we're only looking at hotel spend because we feel like we have more direct connection to that. And so I will say, like, this is specific to those partners. It's a metric that's delivered. I want to plant something, Commissioner Gremmels, with you, is that when we look at our improvements, you hear us talking about year over year, and we something that's a real ethos of our team is that we're always looking to optimize, not maximize. And so for particular partners like the online travel agency, that you'll hear us say ROAS on OTAs all the time, so I've been told not to use any more acronyms. we're going to continue to look at this in particular because we use that as a conversion tactic that's really important for that economy E. So we'll continue to look at that and evaluate it, but it's relatively easy for me to get because I ask Wade for it, and then our partners provide it.
Thank you, and I do like that optimize instead of maximize, and also this whole thing from moving into active travelers to this one to include everyone. So these little tweaks makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Thank you for that clarity. And I'll use the word optimize in the future, so I passed that next quiz. And so I'm really excited too about the organic searches and the opportunity that provides, and how we can optimize the analytics around that. So it's really exciting and great opportunities ahead. So congratulations on the successes and the presentation again.
To follow up just momentarily on what Harish was talking about. So we have a lot of familiarity in the hotel space with return on ad spend with online travel agencies. Can you just give like the simplest example of the scenario that generates our ROAS statistic?
Sure. So we develop creatives, we develop ads, and we put them into the Expedia ecosystem, as I mentioned before, to get people who are looking at travel and to get them interested in traveling to Oregon. And when they finally go through the conversion path, likely through a page that we also had influence over for the landing page for those ads, that booking goes into the return side of the return on ad spend. So it's basically somewhat of a self-contained conversion funnel, if you will. Somebody's interested in their vacation, they see our ad on Expedia, they go and book. That pathway, that spend to the return on ad spend is the number that you see up there for hotels only.
I heard Expedia many times. Almost all hotel owners really don't like Expedia.
Totally.
So is there a way it can be shifted so that reservations and things come outside Expedia straight organic ways? Because it's a very expensive reservation for hotels.
And I would assume that that's the same feeling for Bookings.com, Priceline, all of the aggregators. Yeah.
I'll just hop in there a little bit. I think that's also why throughout our paid media plans, we have multiple layers of our tactics that we're using. And so there are certain things that we do have in play, like the online travel agencies, but we also appreciate your feedback because it helps us as we continue to make decisions of what does the entire flight and suite of paid media look like, and how can we connect that to conversions and targeting that it can drive those visits that are outside of just that funnel. So I think it's just something that we will appreciate it, and we're considerate, and we'll also look at different ways that we can also share the layers within our placements to make sure that it is a good fit for our industry and is delivering the returns that we'd like to see.
The only other thing I would add to that is one of our strongest performing lines in Arrival List, again showing you stay lift and arrival lift, is the website. So very consistently we'll get our highest improvement just by driving traffic to the website. So it is a pathway. Again, you can't book on Travel Oregon, so we try to get as close to conversions as possible, but at the same time, every visit to traveloregon.com does provide lift. So that's very positive.
Any other questions for Wade or Katie? Great conversation. Thank you both very, very much. just to pick up on a theme as Harry's coming up for our next item on the agenda, I want to pick up on something that Lucinda, you just said a moment ago in reference to the current biennial strategic plan and what our goals and objectives are here. We actually state in this current plan our desire to broaden our advertising outside of the kind of that traditional, like, hit it hard in the spring to try and drive travel for the year, and instead move to this always-on approach. And that was very intentional. It was something that we planned to do, when you're looking at the work that we laid out for this 23-25 strategic plan. And we specifically acknowledged in the plan, this is going to cost more. And our ROI may drop because it's going to be more expensive because we're changing consumer behavior. We're encouraging people to come to Oregon maybe at a time of year that they typically wouldn't consider coming to Oregon. But what you're seeing here with the presentations from Michael and Katie and Wade is how the team is continuing to squeeze the value out of every dollar we're entrusted with to make sure that that ROI still manifests itself as strongly as possible. So I just wanted to draw that connection also to our current biennial strategic plan. So at this time, it is my pleasure to bring up Harry and Kevney to present us with an update on the RFP process that we have been navigating regarding the regional destination management organizations that oversee the Regional Cooperative Tourism Program. I'm trying not to use acronyms for at least part of the meeting today. So with that, Kevney, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah. Todd, you forgot the Oregon Wine Country License Plate Tourism Promotion Program.
Yeah, the alcohol chip. So, yes, thank you for that. Kevney.
Thank you for having us today, commissioners. It's great to see you all. For the next little bit, we're hopefully going to allow you to turn off your data side of your brain and just have a conversation about this process. So my role here really, before I turn it over to Harry, is just sort of ground us in where we have been and where we are today. 3 months ago, we sat here and presented recommendations for 6 of 7 regions. And we're back here today after an additional 3-month process of reviewing that 7th and final region, which was the Hood Gorge region. And, before I jump into, sort of where we've been, I just really want to highlight and take this opportunity to really thank Harry and his team and Amber and April and others who have been at this really since I got here to Travel Oregon, which is almost 9 months ago, from the launch of this RFP process to coming forward 3 months ago to being here today, trying to bring the process to a closure. And it hasn't been easy. But the thing that stuck with me is one of the core values of Travel Oregon is integrity. And when you run an RFP process that involves industry partners, at times your friends, acquaintances, integrity is paramount. And I just really want to highlight before we dive in that at every step of this process, integrity was upheld. It was a very thoughtful and a very thorough process. And I think I can speak for all of us who are involved are excited to be here today and ready to move forward with our RDMO partners. But just, a quick reminder of where we've been. We had a committee that was 10 people. That committee was made up of both Chair DeNovo, Vice Chair Willett, as well as representatives from every department within Travel Oregon. That initial process involved a scoring matrix in which those 10 committee members ranked and scored those applicants prior to seeing or being interviewing those applicants. And that same scoring system, which Harry will get into, was then repurposed for this final process. And the max score at that time was 27 points. Then we went forward with an initial interview process with all of those regions at that time. And again, that's where we sort of ran into one region that had thorough competition throughout it and 2 great entities coming forward. And I think that's something else I want to reiterate, that
this is not a reflection of one entity not being great or wonderful or doing great work. This is just the result of who is the best fit for Travel Oregon to move forward with as their RDMO partner in that region. It's not an indictment of another organization or agency to be able to do productive work. We then move forward with those applicants and ranked. Obviously, in this case, this is where we ran into scoring that led us to take a step back and want to take another 3 months to evaluate those two organizations, and that's really where we are today. So I just want to just sort of heap praise on Harry and his team and Amber in contracting and others who really worked on this process. And just sort of the sense of pride I have to be here today in front of you, now trying to wrap this up. So Harry, I want to turn it over to you to walk through where we're at today.
Thanks, Kevney, and good afternoon, commissioners. We defined via the last commission meeting that some additional review of both the Columbia River Gorge Tourism Alliance and Clackamas County doing business as Experience Mountain and Gorge needed additional insights for us to make a recommendation from a committee's perspective. So, in terms of that additional review, we did do a in-depth reference check via the references that were provided in the initial proposal RFP. We also did a budget analysis where we asked for the following things: 5 years of profit and loss statements, budget to actual documents for RCTP and or similar tourism-based programs, and then a list of paid positions from each organization for 5 years. We also scheduled, after kind of doing that internal review, we also scheduled follow-up interviews with both organizations, with the full committee. And in those interviews, I think a difference between the initial process and the additional one was that we asked independent question sets, so we were able to get the details that we needed that we weren't able to ask the first round, and really come across with a more interrogative perspective. After we concluded our due diligence, the evaluation committee reconvened and rescored based on the initial scoring matrix that Kevney mentioned. And then we were able to very easily provide a consensus-based decision for our recommendation, which is as follows. But first, I will share the overall scoring. So for the Columbia River Gorge Tourism Alliance, the RFP review committee scored CGTA an 18.9. And then for Clackamas County, DBA Experience Mount Hood and the Gorge, we scored a 22.6. So whereas the first process did not have really any, it was a dead tie, the first process, there was significant variation, and the committee was able to come to a unanimous consensus around the following recommendation. So that recommendation from the committee's perspective is as follows. For both the Regional Cooperative Tourism Program and the Oregon Wine Country License Plate Tourism Promotion Program, the committee is recommending a term of designation for 8 years, comprised of 4 two-year contracts, conditional on a midpoint review by the Oregon Tourism Commission. So that recommendation, as you remember, was the recommendation that we provided nearly all the applicants via the other process. So it mirrors that process's recommendation as well. So this is a little bit of the justification as to why the committee was able to come to consensus around Clackamas County. So specific considerations around Clackamas County's recommendation that the committee really keyed in on was a clear and demonstrated ability to function as the regional destination management organization across the entire region, so the full geography of the region. Very strong support from industry partners and in particular, destination management and marketing organizations within the region. Clackamas County has also demonstrated a track record of plan and program execution to date. They've been the RDMO, the sitting RDMO or incumbent RDMO since the inception of the program, and they've done an excellent job executing the program. And in the financial analysis, we were able to determine, strong track record of financial accountability, and then as a byproduct of working with the county, strong leverage points with other operational elements, being as they are a county entity. And then lastly, their approach was very holistic, and it demonstrated, strong collaborative approach across all different Travel Oregon's teams. So that is the recommendation that we are putting forth to the commission. And with that, I will hand it over to you for discussion or considerations about the process.
All right. Thank you, Harry. And as has been noted, today's our opportunity for discussion and questions. And tomorrow is when we'll take formal action on the recommendation that's been brought forward. So at this time, any questions for Harry or for Kebney? Or any comments about the process?
Or Lucinda and Greg, who are also a part of it.
Or Lucinda and Greg.
Do you want me to go first?
David, did you have a comment?
Well, I just want to say thank you, Harry, and to the rest of the committee as well. To your point, Kevy, it's not an easy decision, especially when you know so many people within the industry, within the state. It makes it very challenging, but I applaud you guys for the work that you've done, and thank you.
The only remark I wanted to make was, and I probably sound a bit like a broken record, but I truly do mean it. It was a privilege to serve on this committee, and even more of a privilege for Greg and I just to see how talented the staff is. And I think at our last meeting, when we came together to make our final decision, to come to a unanimous decision, I think is pretty powerful. And I think I know there was a lot of conversation. Scott Bricker, you remind me of it's the biggest compliment I could give you. You remind me of my late husband. And you ask really great questions. And I think the questions you ask led us all the way to full circle. And so I really want to commend you for that, and commend you for the questions that you ask. And again, thank you to the entire team for the work that you did on this. And I think it was the appropriate choice. Now you can go, Greg.
I don't think I need to talk. I'm thankful to be involved in that process as well for exact same reasons. I have an appreciation for your energy and honesty through this process. And it was comprised of varying opinions and varying takes on the information, and I appreciated a forum where we could share those opinions freely, and they were shared in great discussions. One of the best processes I've ever been through to come to a decision that meant a lot to the state and a whole lot to that region. And I appreciated the deep dive the second go round and the information that came back from asking more questions and examining and following up on those reference checks. And my real hope in this is that community continues to benefit from both organizations. I hope that both organizations continue to cooperate and really, really work hard for that region that needs both of them in their individual segments. So thanks again.
Thank you.
I think you deserve a round of applause.
All right, Brian. Commissioners, this next update is our final one for this particular briefing. I want to bring you an update on where we are with the strategic vision KPIs. When the strategic vision was adopted in June of 22, It not only contained the 3 lenses of our destination stewardship approach, the 4 objectives that you've heard referenced here today. Affectionately within Travel Oregon, they're often referred to as the 4 E's of equity, economy, environment, and experiences. And also the 19 strategies, but then specifically, what are the KPIs? How are we going to track our work, and acknowledging that in some, if not many of the areas, we needed to establish benchmarks because this was going to be some new work for us as we went forward. So it's my pleasure at this time to turn the mic over to our birthday boy, Mr. Brian Mullaney.
I hope you guys didn't think that we were done with numbers. There's a lot of competition earlier, but we are just getting started with the numbers. So good afternoon, commissioners. As Todd said, my name is Brian Mullaney. I run our strategy, research, and analytics team, or the SRA team, as we like to call it. And my goal today is to give everyone here an update on where we are with our 10-year strategic vision KPIs and our progress that we've made so far in the biennium. All right. Before diving into the presentation, I wanted to share a quick quote that I pulled directly out of our 10-year strategic vision. And the quote is this: "No vision becomes a reality without measuring its progress." And I think that really speaks to kind of what we're going to talk about today and kind of Travel Oregon's commitment to making sure that we are making progress towards this vision that we put in place. But before jumping into the results, I wanted to briefly remind everyone about the differences between KPIs and goals. The aim here is to align on terminology and expectations. During our initial work mapping out our KPIs, there was often a desire to layer goals into our KPI language. A KPI, or key performance indicator, is just that. It's a measure or indicator that we are using to identify performance and should not include goal language. For example, if we are trying to grow visitor spending by 2% over the biennium, our KPI is visitor spending. Our goal is to grow it 2% over the biennium. Our goal is not to grow visitor spending by, or our KPI is not to grow visitor spending by 2% over the biennium. So that's a little nuanced, but I wanted to get a little bit into the weeds here and make sure that we're all using the same terminology as we move forward with this presentation. Next, I wanted to remind everyone of our 4 KPI buckets from our 10-year strategic plan: economic prosperity, Oregon's tourism diversity, Oregon's reputation, and environmental sustainability. Looking at the individual indicators within each of these 4 buckets, we get a total of 22 distinct indicators or measures that the team needs to track towards measuring our progress to realizing our strategic vision. And lastly, it's important to note that we have not created any goals for these KPIs just yet. That is on my radar and will be one of the first major assignments of our new Insights and Planning Manager, Dipti Mooney O'Connor, who is in the room with us today. Week 2, and she's already at her first commission meetings. So please, if you get a chance, introduce yourself. I'll do my best over the rest of today and this evening to try to get her around to meet all of the commissioners as well. But along with managing and running our business intelligence platform, KPIs will be a large part of her responsibility. And now let's jump into our first bucket. Here we have our 3 economic impact KPIs from our latest 2023 results. Across the board, you can see year-over-year growth in all indicators. Additionally, through the following slides, in the upper right corner, you can see whether or not the KPI being mentioned has a baseline set yet. I also wanted to present the data with some more historical context going back to 2018. So we can see how we've been trending ahead of, through, and after the pandemic. From 2022 to 2023, we are experiencing a leveling in our travel spending, but we are still up 0.6%. And those of you with eagle eyes may see a 1% there in the 14 billion with year-over-year change. That's already Dipti doing her job, making sure that I am being accurate. That is a rounding error in this presentation, so that should be at 0.6%. Here are jobs numbers. You can see that we grew 2% over the prior year. And tax revenue, including federal, state, and local taxes, which shows the largest growth of all our economic impact indicators at up 3%. All right, let's move on to our next bucket of KPIs, Oregon's reputation. This is our largest bucket, which contains KPIs related to our resident sentiment study and our visitor profile study. There are 5 KPIs related to resident sentiment. They include the residents' perception of the economic, environmental, cultural, and social impacts of tourism, followed by a resident's overall support for tourism development. Looking at the results from our recently completed 2024 resident sentiment study, you can see that across the board, positive perceptions outweigh negative ones. And additionally, we can see that overall support for tourism development is coming in positive at 0.9. But I think it's helpful to look at the changes from our last resident sentiment survey back in 2021. When you look at the first set of bar charts for the positive sentiment, you can see that overall perceptions dropped slightly from 2021, going from 3.6 to 3.5. However, positive sentiment still outweighs negative sentiment for 2021 and 2024. The good news is that we also saw a large decrease in negative sentiment going from 2021 to 2024, dropping from 3.5 to 3.1. So there is less negative sentiment in our most recent study. Diving even deeper now, when looking at our 2024 results versus 2021 by perception, positive sentiment for all 4 perceptions trailed or matched our 2021 results. When looking at negative sentiment comparisons across all 4 perceptions, negative sentiment decreased significantly, apart from social perceptions, which had a modest decrease. And lastly, for our final resident sentiment KPI, overall support for tourism development, we can see that support has grown from 0.4 to 0.9. And overall, support for tourism development is heading in the right direction. Our next set of KPIs within the Oregon's reputation bucket pertain to our visitor profile study. The KPIs include visitor satisfaction, visitor net promoter score, and a visitor's likelihood to travel to Oregon in the future. The results here are from our 2022 visitor profile study. Overall trip satisfaction came in at 94.7% out of 100%, but unfortunately for all these KPIs, we do not have a prior study to compare against just yet. The next visitor profile study will be fielded in calendar year 2025 across 2 waves, so we should have those comparisons towards the end of our current fiscal. The next our visitor net promoter score came in at 44 on a negative 100 to 100 scale, indicating a positive result. And lastly, our visitors showed a strong likelihood to return, with 88.4% of respondents indicating that they will return within the next 12 months. All right, next let's talk about our third KPI bucket, Oregon tourism diversity. Our first KPI here relates to measuring and monitoring the racial composition of the Oregon tourism workforce. These results here are from calendar year Q1 2023 from our Lightcast data set. Next, we have the latest data around the racial composition of Oregon visitors from our 2022 visitor profile study. I'll pause here so everyone can look at it. And next, we have the racial composition of the Travel Oregon staff as of September 11th, 2024. Net staff sized from March to September went from 51 to 64 FTEs. And finally, we have our two indicators around funding and engagement for supporting underserved and under-resourced communities. We've been making slow but steady progress with these indicators. Lisa has been working on definitions for underserved and under-resourced, and I have been meeting with teams to get our hands around mechanisms for tracking funding. As you can see, we have no baseline set here yet. And lastly, we have our environmental sustainability indicators, which presents our largest gap in measurement as we have no baselines set here yet. First, we have Travel Oregon's investment in terms of funding and engagement in supporting Oregon's greenhouse gas reduction goals. This KPI ties to Executive Order 20-04, directing state of Oregon agencies to take actions to reduce and regulate greenhouse gas emissions. Next steps will be determined as part of the 25-27 biennial plan. Next, we have records and monitors the development and promotion of regenerative tourism products and experiences. Again, no baseline is set here yet. Second to last, we have records and monitors the empowerment of the tourism industry to take steps to reduce their carbon emissions and adopt regenerative tourism practices. And finally, we have records and monitors the empowerment of visitors to take steps to reduce their carbon emissions and adopt regenerative tourism practices. And that brings us to our next steps. Our mission for the biennium was to establish baselines for all KPIs. With 9 months left in the biennium, we have baseline 14 of 22 KPIs. While we will continue to work on baselining the remaining 8 KPIs, we also need to start establishing goals for the KPIs that do have their baseline set. We aim to start that work this month with the intention to conclude towards the end of January 2025. And these goals will start with the launch of the 25-27 biennial plan in July of 2025. So how are we going to track our advancement towards these KPI goals? Via our strategic vision dashboard. We are in the process of building this dashboard out, which will help us monitor our progress. We have some working drafts, but we still need more time to refine it. Once completed, it will be available on the Travel Oregon industry site, along with the strategic plan progress report. And finally, before going to questions, I'd like to remind everyone that the Industry Partners Survey is now live. Depending on response rates, we are aiming to close the survey around October 10th. For those who are not familiar with the survey, it seeks to collect feedback from workers connected to the tourism industry that will help inform our strategic direction, as well as the strategic direction of our regional partners. The audience for this survey is broad. In addition to including hotels, DMOs, and tribal tourism partners, it includes arts and cultures, events and entertainment, food and beverage, transportation services, and more. If you can't get the QR code to work here, there are QR codes on your desk. We also have QR codes in the back of the room. And for those online, you can also see that the survey is on the Travel Oregon Industry homepage. We want to thank Michael for all of his QR code creation. All right. And now I will open it up for questions. Commissioner Youngblood.
Brian, can you take us back to the second resident sentiment slide?
Yes. I think it's this one.
Yes, sir. I don't understand, and I needed more clarity. In both of these comparative circumstances, both positive and negative 2024 scores below 2021, right?
Correct.
And so my primitive brain says, but if you squeeze a balloon, if one goes down, the other must go up. So I'm guessing that this is based on maybe a KPI model and the delta is in neutral. I don't, again, if positive goes down, we'll say year over year, then my intuition would say the negative should go up, filling the void where positive went down, but that's not what this reflects.
No, yeah, so in this case, the negative went down, which is a good thing in this case. When we go from 2021 to 2024, the 3.5 to the 3.1, if I'm answering your question correctly.
No, that just made it make sense for me.
For me, I think they were different sets of questions, right?
Correct.
So you
Yes.
could say yes. You could go ahead, Brian. You're going to do it much more eloquently than me with the different sets of questions. So that would probably be the disparity, right, between the numbers.
Yeah, correct. So there are different sets of questions between the positive and the negative, and we're taking an average of the different combinations to get to the numbers that you're seeing here.
Oh.
In other words, both
so
positive could be a 5 and negative could be a 5, or they could both be 0.
So how do you feel about Scott? 5, positive. How do you feel about Scott? 6, negative, right? I mean, I'm being facetious, but right, so there's that. Yeah.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, well, while you're educating me, then if you'll go to the key visitor perceptions, which is just a few down, with a suitcase on it.
Oh, visitor satisfaction, yeah.
There it is. So the net promoter score of 44, that's on a 100-point scale?
It's negative 100 to 100. So anything positive is a positive, you're a promoter of the visitor is promoting their satisfaction with their trip to Oregon.
And do I remember that the formula is something like promoters minus detractors equals
Yeah, it's
score?
on I believe it's an 11-point scale, so using 0 out of 10, and you have 9 and 10s are promoters, 6, 7, 8 are neutrals, and then the rest are detractors. So we take the promoters minus the detractors.
It would be interesting to see a graphical representation of that with this data, just so we could see what those 3 pie segments look like.
Yes. The upcoming visitor strategic vision dashboard has a speedometer chart on it, so it kind of like think about a gas gauge and kind of what's good and what's bad. So we are working on that, which I think will definitely be an easier way to kind of grasp and understand that promoter score.
I love you, Brian. Happy birthday.
Thank you, Commissioner Youngblood.
I was going to say, are there other questions or expressions of love and support for Brian that you would like to come forward?
Well, happy birthday. Happy birthday,
Thank you.
Brian.
I'm just kind of disappointed that I haven't created a warm, fuzzy spot in Commissioner Willett's brain yet with my numbers, but I'll go back and work on the marketing numbers.
Funny. My question is, so we approved this 10-year strategic vision in June of 2022, and we have 14 of, I think you said, the 22 KPIs outlined. And I know that we started this work essentially the minute, right, that we approved it as a commission. Will you have the rest of these KPIs done this year?
In terms of baselining them, the challenging part is the environmental one. So there's a little bit of a chicken and the egg right now in terms of, like, do we create the KPI before the environmental prioritized strategies, going back to the 10-year strategic vision, get selected and rolled out as part of the 25-27 biennium. The team has been doing a lot of work to prep for that and kind of doing research in terms of, like, what are other DMOs doing? We've been in conversations with Discover BC, Visit BC, I can't remember what British Columbia, to use one of their models that they're using. So I'd like to have them done by the end of the fiscal year and prepped for the biennial plan, but we're still digging into that.
Just to add some extra context to what Brian just said, because he's spot on. Commissioners will recall that there are 19 strategies that are contained in the 4 objectives that are part of the vision. Not all 19 are in this biennial strategic plan, as Brian was alluding to. So the focus for the baselines has been on where those strategies and those objectives have lined up. Obviously, we've made those the priority. As we've looked ahead, especially at the ones around the environment, there is a strong chance, based on internal conversations, that we will come back to the commission probably at the December meeting and ask for reconsideration of some of those KPIs and the way they're worded. Because there are some things that were put in there in 2022 that felt like they were right, that we think need to be revisited. For example, we talk about, I think it's the empowerment of the tourism industry. Well, how do you measure empowerment? So we think there are better word choices for us, and so we'd like to consider some revisions to some of the KPIs and bring those back to the commission at their December meeting.
Thank you, Todd. And
I have one question, sorry. On this environmental sustainability, Travel Oregon doesn't own any entity or operates, so how would you be able to, what's the plan on getting this less of whatever the carbon footprints and all that?
I think I'll have to put a TBD on that one, right? So a lot of that work in terms of kind of how we're going to move forward with environmental sustainability based on the prioritized strategies that Todd was talking about still need to be defined and worked on. There's a lot that we can do in terms of what Travel Oregon can do itself in terms of Travel Oregon limiting our carbon offsets, but it's going to be hard, obviously, to do that on a state level. But there's many conversations that need to happen on that side of things.
Oh, thank you.
I'm very pleased to hear you say that come December, we might have that conversation. We will in terms of revision, because I think it's needed. Very, very much. Something I've been looking at. Great presentation, but I still would like to see us, take a closer look and see if this work can be done prior to the end of this year and not carried over. But that's something.
You mean fiscal year before we get into the next biennium? Or do you mean like the next 12 weeks?
No.
Okay.
And to be clear, you're talking about the establishment of baselines for all the KPIs before we reach the end of this biennium. Noted. Thank you.
The other thing I wanted to add to piggyback off what Todd was talking about before that and related to making our decisions around which prioritized strategies we're going to focus on, that is highly dependent upon the results that we get from the industry partner survey, which is the QR code in front of you. So I highly encourage you, along with everyone in the audience, to make sure that we contribute into that survey and we get a well-rounded sample across the board from all areas of the state.
So with that said, how are you getting a good return, or? Yeah.
Right now it's,
and what
we've been open for two weeks, I believe. At this point, I don't know, Javier, if you have the most recent numbers in front of you, but we are aiming to hopefully get 100 responses per region, and hopefully, certain regions like Portland and the coast tend to oversample. And we then come in and apply our own weighting model to that to make sure that we get a statistically significant and well-represented sample across the board. We're trying to get as many people as we can. We had a lot of success coming off of our most recent resident sentiment survey, which had over 6,000 responses on that. That's a different model in terms of what we're trying to do versus going just to the tourism industry. But as of right now, we're happy with the progress that we're making, but we can always use more.
Jennifer, you had a question?
Actually, I have a gift. I have completed my survey.
Gold star.
Thank you. But also, I wanted to ask on these surveys, do you have it broken out where you're getting your responses back from geographically? And can we see that?
I believe we have zip code, don't we? Yes, I'm getting thumbs up from the team. Yeah, so we have zip code, and yeah, we can share. We can definitely share the results for whatever we have with you, and however way you want to see it.
So on some of this information, it just would be helpful for my brain to be able to see what the response is from an urban area versus a rural area, and if we have any kind of data that shows, is the response the same or is it very diverse?
Yeah, like we can do that on almost all of our recent studies, whether it's visitor profile or maybe I should say for resident sentiment, because we have it down to the zip code level across the board, and we can compare. However, we get into a little bit tricky when we're defining what does rural mean versus urban, and that's a lot of the work that I mentioned previously that we're doing in this first biennium is definitional work. What does underserved mean? What does under-resourced mean? And like putting hard definitions around them so we can track and use that consistently. But we should be able to get to the urban and rural cuts for the industry partner survey as well as resident sentiment.
Thanks.
Brian, I want to thank you for the presentation and for the information shared and taking us through the process and sharing the progress that you and the team have made. I really appreciate it. I just wonder if there's an opportunity to work with a state board, the Governor's Sustainable Board, and discuss the equitable equations that they have worked hard in developing as far as social, economic, and environmental. And there might be an opportunity to reach out and talk with the staff of Governor Kotek's Sustainable Board and see what measures that they've used and the benchmarks that have been established with other agencies and departments within the state of Oregon. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, no, thank you, Commissioner Gremmels. I know I don't want to give too much away, but we, at least for the underserved definition, we are going and at least using the base of the governor's definition or the state of Oregon's definition as kind of a starting place and then going from there, but there's definitely opportunities to expand. We love it when we can rely on our other state level organizations to kind of collaborate, and they're definitely, for the most part, in my experience, very willing to collaborate with us as well. And that's definitely some of the work that Lisa's been doing in making sure that she's meeting with various different organizations to try to put together the correct definitions.
Great work. And thank you again, and happy birthday.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'm sorry.
If Commissioner Rowe gets a gold star for completing the survey, then I want special credit because I reposted Mo's solicitation.
The LinkedIn?
Yes. And I think this should be a challenge to every member of the commission to make sure that this goes on your professional social media, encouraging your colleagues throughout the state.
Thank you.
Challenge accepted.
Challenge accepted.
Got a smackdown started up here now. Any other questions for Brian?
I can start a new KPI, which is the number of commissioners who have completed the industry partner survey. Maybe we'll do that one next time.
Can we drop a pixel on their LinkedIn so that we can track how many other surveys are done because they shared it?
Yeah, if you clicked on the LinkedIn, we're tracking you, so we'll know.
All right. Brian, thank you very, very much. Great presentation. Chair DeNovo, I will turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you. That concludes staff presentations. Are there any additional business or announcements from the commissioners? Greg.
Because you guys do such a great job marketing, collecting data, determining my demographic, because I get all these newsletters and I'm inspired to explore Oregon. I thought I'd just have someone pick 1 to 3 for my last 3 weekends, because I took inspiration from your messaging and I explored the live-in daylights out of Oregon. Chair or Mr. Youngblood, 1 to 3, please.
I don't understand the question.
1 to 3, please.
3?
Okay, last weekend, Cowboy Dinner Tree, Courier Guard Station on recreation.gov, fly fished a small stream in the valley leading up to it that dumps into the Sican, which ends up in Bly, and fly fishing the Shiwakan out of Paisley, Oregon, which has a great mosquito festival. Thank you for picking number 3.
That's his favorite birdie fish.
That was last weekend. Thank you.
Any other, well, I think you bring up a good point, Greg, and that point would be, as commissioners, we have this wonderful opportunity to go to all these great places. I was having a conversation with Commissioner Hill, and I think as a result of his experience at Oktoberfest at our last commission meeting, he took his whole family there this year. So you raise a really great point, Greg. And with that said, I want to remind everyone that tonight we have the opportunity to dine with local leaders and tourism partners starting at 6:30 at Canita Hot Springs Resort following their reopening. I do want to say, when I said it's been 40 years, it's been 40 years since I've been to Canita. I have been to this area. I have been in this area. So tomorrow, September 25th, the commission meeting will be held here at the Inn at Cross Keys Station starting at 9:30. I would like to thank the staff truly for a very informative and wonderful briefing. And with that, meeting is adjourned.